Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Europe will not back down on its support for Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced that France and the United Kingdom will send reassurance troops to the war-torn country to overlook the implementation of any potential ceasefire. More on that in just a moment, but first we dive into tonight's headlines. The EU ponders a fitting response after the US imposes a 25% tariff on all foreign automotive vehicles. Poland's foreign minister meets with Romania's top officials ahead of a presidential election rerun. Women's tennis world number 2, Iga Świątek gets knocked out of the Miami Open by the Philippines' Alexandra Ayala. European reassurance forces will be stationed in Ukraine as a deterrent against Russia, said French President Emmanuel Macron after a summit of the Coalition of the Willing, which took place in Paris. As France and the UK vowed to have their troops involved, other EU leaders are considering the initiative with caution, as the nature and extent of the troops' involvement is not yet known. Meanwhile, the EU is still upping its defenses amid increasing tensions on the continent. Kazimierz Łysiak has a detailed look at the Wednesday summit and has this report.
Leaders of 30 Western allies gathered in Paris on Thursday to discuss ways of ensuring a just and stable peace in Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer repeated their intentions to send troops to Ukraine, this time in more detail.
These are the reassurance forces that we could deploy in Ukraine the day after. These reassurance forces, part of the French-British proposal from several weeks ago, are not intended to be peacekeeping forces. They are not meant to be forces stationed on the front lines or forces that replace the Ukrainian army. Instead, they would consist of troops from certain member states, not all, as some do not have the capacity or the political conditions to do so.
Macron also added that these forces would be deployed in strategically pre-identified locations with the Ukrainians, providing long-term support and serving as a deterrent against a potential Russian aggression.
We will be ready to operationalise a peace deal whenever its precise shape turns out to be. And we will work together to ensure Ukraine's security so it can defend and deter against future attacks.
President Zelensky welcomed this strong voice of support, and he's also not coming home empty-handed, as President Macron announced Wednesday that France will be supporting Ukraine with an additional €2 billion of aid.
It's the common voice, how to strengthen, how to push Russia, and everybody. That is crucial, that everybody understood and understand that Russia for today doesn't want any kind of peace.
But the so-called Coalition of the Willing has a different level of willingness amongst European leaders. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has already said he's out when it comes to sending troops to Ukraine, while other allies like the Netherlands expressed their general support for the idea without committing troops.
I think most of the European countries recognize that if they send troops to Ukraine, there will be a danger. I think the real fear is that unless all of the European countries chip in, that really would be too dangerous.
It was yet another summit of Western leaders without the presence of US President Donald Trump, a clear sign of Europe having to take more responsibility for its own safety. France is emerging as one of the leading voices on this, which is also to the liking of the Polish government.
We are currently finalizing work on a treaty between Poland and France. President Macron and myself are close to signing it. I won't reveal too many details now, but it could be a groundbreaking treaty when it comes to bilateral security guarantees.
President Macron previously floated the idea of expanding the French nuclear umbrella to other European partners, with Poland expressing interest. It's still unclear whether the upcoming treaty will include this solution. Other leaders also made sure to emphasize they're against lifting sanctions on Russia, one of the conditions made by the Kremlin to implement this week's Black Sea ceasefire.
What is also important to us is that stopping sanctions at this time would be a serious mistake. The sanctions must be continued, and Europe and the US must take a clear stand together so that we can continue to use this opportunity to support Ukraine.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said the Trump administration will now evaluate Russia's demands, but the sanctions can't be lifted without the green light from the EU. A total ceasefire in Ukraine is something Russia hasn't agreed to either. While peace still feels miles away, Ukraine at least has the backing of its European partners. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
The European Commission says it will respond appropriately to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff bonanza next week. The statement comes as the 47th President of the United States threatened to slap 25% tariffs on all automotive vehicles entering the U.S. Much of the impetus behind Trump's EU attack is focused on the EU's VAT, or value-added tax. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins is in the Belgian capital to explain why VAT is not the boogeyman it's being made out to be.
Another day, another tariff. US President Donald Trump late on Wednesday announced his intent to slap 25% import duties on all cars entering the US market. Now, while the attack isn't specifically targeted at the EU, we've heard that 47th President of the United States railing against the EU's value-added tax system. Now, many have seen on the stock market that European shares in cars have fallen to a 2-week low. Many are also expecting the price of those cars in the US to jump thousands of euros. TVP World asked the European Commission at a press conference on Thursday whether Trump's spurious claims about the value-added tax system are true. Let's take a listen to what they had to say in response.
I've answered this question before, and on this occasion I choose not to dignify it with the response again, because value-added tax is not a trade measure. It is not a tariff. It's something that's widely used across the world, and to suggest that it is some form of trade measure is nonsensical. And I'm not going to repeat what I've said from this podium already about that.
The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said late last night that she regrets the measure and she'll take the next couple of days to assess potential outcomes. We heard some strident criticisms coming out of Berlin, with Germany's Finance Minister Robert Habeck coming to the defence of that country's most iconic car producers. We're talking about Volkswagen, BMW and Mercedes. He said the EU should not take the news lying down. The French President Emmanuel Macron was also strident in his criticisms. Let's take a listen to what that leader had to say out of Paris on Thursday.
Imposing tariffs means breaking value chains. It means creating an inflationary effect in the short term and destroying jobs. So it is not good for the American or the European economy, just as it is not good for the Canadian or Mexican economy. I find it kind of a paradox that the main allies of the United States are the first to be taxed.
One thing is clear, we'll find out the true intentions of that US president on the 2nd of April. This is what he's dubbing as Liberation Day. We're expecting a manifesto to be handed down that day regarding all of the US's major trade partnerships and policies with its significant partners, including the EU. We're also expecting a response to come out of Brussels at the end of next week. Angela Skujins from the Belgian capital for TVP World.
We now stay on the subject of a new 25% tariff on all foreign automotive vehicles imported into the U.S. As a result of this announcement, shares in stock markets across the globe have plummeted as countries in Central and Eastern Europe region remain major producers of cars and car components. The continent will be heavily affected. The EU Trade Commissioner has now warned that the U.S. could impose another round of 20 to 25% tariffs on all EU exports to the U.S. on top of the existing ones. Jan Kennedy reports.
Europe's automotive industry, already struggling in recent years, has suffered yet another major setback.
And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States.
The news sparked a negative reaction from the markets, with global automotive shares, including those in the US, plummeting.
How it will exactly play out is unclear. because we don't know whether the demand in the US will really come down or whether US consumers are able to or willing to pay a higher price for European cars, or whether it is the European car manufacturers that will see their profit margins shrinking.
The negative effects will spill over to Central and Eastern European countries, which supply key automotive components to Germany.
Central and Eastern Europe is not only a major car producer, but also a major component producer. And in fact, here, could be a really major impact in terms of exports to the US.
Analysts estimate that the economies of the Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia and Romania could shrink by 0.5% of GDP. Poland, while a major exporter, is less dependent on car exports. The news follows Washington's earlier tariff announcements, which targeted aluminium and steel imports, which are said to affect Europe indirectly.
Donald Trump imposed tariffs on steel worldwide, not just on the European Union. Countries that were previously exporting to the US, such as Turkey, India, South Korea and Japan, now face restricted access to the US market. These countries will look for alternative markets, and the European Union will be a primary target.
But that's not all. EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič has reportedly said that he expects Washington to impose 20 to 25% tariffs on all EU imports on top of the existing ones, in what the US calls reciprocal tariffs.
The effect would be seen on the producers as well as consumer side. So with regards to the import of goods to European market from the US, that would be very clearly seen that the prices would raise, and in the long term probably the demand would drop.
So far, the EU has struggled to respond decisively, delaying a planned €26 billion retaliation package. However, more clarity is expected on April 2nd, which Trump has called Liberation Day.
It looks as if the European Commission will then want to present a full package of retaliation. Whether this will be blanket tariffs, so across the board on all US goods, or whether it will be more specific, remains unclear.
As European companies assess the potential impact the tariffs may have, they're facing a critical question: how to adapt.
I do believe that it would be pretty strong effect in inflow of FDI from Europe. The question is if these European companies would be willing to invest within the economy, which is still, not very clear in terms of the economic policy.
For the time being, one thing is certain: European businesses should brace for impact.
The Polish president should be elected by Poles, and the Romanian president should be elected by Romanians. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said during his recent meeting with his Romanian counterpart, as well as the country's prime minister. The foreign minister's visit to Romania comes as the country prepares a rerun of its presidential election. Is Poland looking to learn some lessons ahead of its own presidential election set to take place in May? Paweł Trzaskowski might have an answer to this question.
Economic and defense cooperation, combating disinformation and illegal migration. These were the topics discussed during the Polish foreign minister's visit to Romania. However, the key issue was the incoming presidential elections in both countries.
We're watching closely the threats to the democratic process because just as we believe that the Polish president should be elected by Poles, the Romanian president should be elected by the Romanians.
That was a reference to the failed presidential elections in Romania. Its first round was won by extreme-right, largely unknown candidate Călin Georgescu. However,
the Supreme Court annulled these results by claiming that there was foreign interference.
And the evidence pointed to Russia. Nonetheless, because of this decision, Romania came under fire of Donald Trump's new administration.
Now we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors.
Some experts believe, though, that Romania became a target of such attacks by coincidence.
I don't think Donald Trump, Elon Musk and J.D. Vance really care about Călin Georgescu or even Romania.
Supporting Romanian anti-establishment candidates is to be a means to prove a point.
They need to show their own electorate and they need to show everyone around the world that their recipe is the one that works. Romania is the counterexample.
A counterexample that is still a vital part of NATO structures in the region.
The Eastern Bloc of the former communist countries became more and more important on the eastern flank of the NATO and now of the European defense.
Romania has been a NATO country since 2004. It's the second largest force on the bloc's eastern flank after Poland. It hosts a US ballistic missile defense system and is currently developing its military airbase in Constanta. And after the Russian invasion on Ukraine, it was heavily bolstered by NATO forces from the US, Britain and France, among others. Also, since the conflict started, Russian drones aimed at Ukraine hit Romanian soil several times. And the just announced ceasefire on the Black Sea might strengthen Russian presence there, undermining Romanian security even more. That's why both Poland and Romania announced they are to take part in NATO's coalition of the willing, but with no boots on the ground, as confirmed by the Polish foreign minister on Thursday. Warsaw and Bucharest plan to provide support in logistic hubs. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
Thursday saw the conclusion of a purchase agreement for the Badger infantry fighting vehicles by the Polish Armament Agency from the treasury-controlled Polish Armaments Group. 111 vehicles costing approximately €1.5 billion will be delivered by 2029 as part of Poland's effort to improve its military capabilities. Zuzanna Jurek reports.
Polish Defense Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz announced the signing of the purchasing agreement for the Borsuki or Badger infantry fighting vehicles. The agreement was signed by the Polish Armaments Group and the Armaments Agency. Speaking at a press conference this morning, this is what Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz had to say on this matter.
Jest po prostu wydarzeniem.
This is the event of the decade. This highly advanced project is based solely and exclusively on Poland's industries. We are proud of Wolverines from other platforms, but this is the difference in Borsuki. They are Polish in their entirety from start to finish. This collaboration of private and public sectors is what we need in our activities.
The agreement relates to the purchasing of 111 vehicles estimated at a total of €1.5 billion to be delivered by 2029. The Borsuki vehicles are set to replace the BWP-1 Soviet-style vehicles, which had been the go-to vehicle for the Polish army. The design from the 1960s has, however, made them slightly obsolete. The Borsuki vehicles are produced by Stalowa Wola Steelworks, which is part of the Polish Armaments Group. It is said that if they reach mass production, they will become the go-to vehicle and equipment for the Polish army. This comes amidst the efforts to substantially boost Poland's military capabilities. Defense spending is already significant, having had reached 4% of GDP spending by 2024. And this is amounting to approximately €37.6 billion, which is equivalent and matches up the spending of some of the biggest defense spenders, including Canada and Italy. Arms procurement has also been significant, totaling €20 billion. Finding domestic suppliers, however, has been somewhat of a challenge. Currently, only 30% of contracts are given to domestic suppliers, totaling €3.1 billion. Poland is trying to revitalize its arms industry, and today's protagonist, the Polish Armaments Group, is at the helm of these efforts. Now, the group has faced its own challenges in the last couple of years. This includes the rapid turnovers of CEOs, which has prohibited and delayed the mass production of the Borsuki vehicles, as well as issues in trying to access EU funding.
First, money. But once you secure money, there is a certain delay for ramping up production, right? Because the production capacity was just not there, right? So it's been taking some time for PGZ to produce these military systems.
The pressure is now on the Polish Armaments Group to deliver. Should it be successful, it will serve as a significant step towards modernizing Polish armed forces. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
This week was not a lucky one for Poland's tennis darling and one of the most successful players in recent history, Iga Świątek. After an incident which took place over the weekend, described by her representative as, I quote, a direct transition from verbal aggression online to harassment in the real world, she was knocked out of the Miami Open by the Philippines' Alexandra Ayala and openly criticized her team. Aaron Damon has more on the story.
Iga Świątek is in a rough patch.
Well, for sure I wasn't playing my best game, and I felt like my forehand collapsed a little bit, so it wasn't comfortable. And Alexandra for sure used her chances and, pushed me. So yeah, for sure she deserves to win this match.
That's the Polish tennis star and world number 2 after being knocked out of the Miami Open by Philippine wildcard Alexandra Ayala. Świątek lost in straight sets 6-2, 7-5, with her coaches standing up from their chairs several times and trying to instruct her, only leading to more exasperation on the court.
Iga started to think, could I possibly lose to a girl who is number 140 in the rankings? The whole Poland is watching. Precious time, evening time in Poland to watch the match. She became nervous.
Świątek has struggled since winning the French Open last year, copping a 1-month ban for testing positive for a banned substance, which the International Tennis Integrity Agency accepted came from contamination of her melatonin medication. In just the last month, she openly criticised her coaching team, was forced to apologise for accidentally hitting a ball at a ball boy out of frustration, and needed extra security due to verbal abuse. But there's optimism that she'll get back to her best.
I believe in Iga, and I think we don't have much to worry about. She's fine. She's still the fastest player on the court. Nobody moves as quickly as she does. She has the best backhand in the world, and she has a very tough mental strength.
Hopes the 5-time Grand Slam champion can add a 6th as Świątek returns to the clay courts of Paris in May. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
Leaders from more than 30 countries met in Paris on Thursday for crucial discussions as part of the Coalition of the Willing. The alliance is met as a pledge of support for Ukraine in the event of a U.S. negotiated ceasefire or peace deal. One of the main points of focus was providing Ukraine with reassurance forces, ensuring the implementation of the ceasefire agreement if it's reached. Jarosław Kraszewski, the former Armed Forces Supervision Department Director at the Polish National Security Bureau, joins me now to discuss the Paris meeting, Ukraine ceasefire, and more. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Hey, good evening.
Thank you so much for joining. So, before the premise for the coalition was the peacekeeping force. As of now, we are looking at the reassurance forces. What do you think those reassurance forces are going to be? What's behind it, and what they will be composed of? What will be the major tasks?
We have better experience since 2014 when the Russian aggression started in Ukraine. After that, there were some initiatives, multinational ones, just to stop firings, shellings, and mostly killing soldiers and innocent people. And the Russian Federation promised many times to stop it and keep it quiet. I mean, the combat operations, and nothing happened. This is why multinational community has decided to do something. We are right now facing a big challenge. What kind of mission it should be? Either the peacekeeping, peace stabilization, or many others. And we need to set up a solid foundation as an international community, either EU or NATO, or the combination of both. We have to keep it in mind that there is still a UN, and which could be the best solution to send the blue helmets in order to keep the Russian Federation and Ukraine at the positions where and when the ceasefire agreement is going to be signed up. And I think that right now EU is playing the crucial role. Apart from that, EU is typically political and industrial organization. It's not a defense organization, because NATO is typically military organization dedicated for defensive purposes. But in the situation when some NATO countries from Europe mostly didn't reach the promised level of ambition, I mean at least 2% of GDP dedicated for defense purposes. It happened in 2014 during the NATO summit in Wales. And after 10 years, President Trump checked it out and said that if those countries are not supposed to reach this level, minimum this level, he's not going to support them whatever happens in the future. This is why EU, first of all, has decided to relocate extremely huge money, I mean 800 billion euros for European defense industries in respective countries. And having in mind that, as I said, EU is a political industrial organization, but it has own military committee, and EU has a battle group concept which exists and which is fulfilled with the troops from the respective membering states.
What about this concept?
Right now, the heads of states are discussing possibilities how the coalition of willings could be engaged in Ukraine to stop the shelling and exchange of fires, and stop the killing of troops and soldiers and innocent people, and keep this period of time as long as possible.
Let's focus on the reassurance forces. We've heard from, because there is a lot of talk, obviously Europe supports Ukraine, but when it comes to actually putting boots on the ground, the reassurance forces would be composed of soldiers from France and from the UK. This is what we know as of now. What about other countries, and what about Poland?
Since the very beginning when this information popped up, I am at the position that the Polish military should stay in Poland, on the Polish territory. Why? First of all, we are building the strongest military power in Europe. That's the first point. The second point is if we reach the point when the modernization process, let's say, is stopped and it's finished, we have to keep this potential balance between engagement abroad and having on our shoulders responsibility over the security of Central and Western Europe. In the past, it was in Germany. And Germany played this role. Right now, Poland as a leader in military spendings in NATO, leader in building new capacities and capabilities of the military, having brand new equipment, which is, first of all, capable to take part in the joint operations, multinational joint operations, either in the structure of NATO or either in the structure of a coalition. It doesn't matter right now. And we have to keep this power here on the Polish territory, because we don't know what's going to happen with the Russian Federation. It's an unpredictable state. And if Putin decides to launch another attack over one of the countries from NATO, we should be the very first one power which can stop it, make it slower, and make them suffer a lot of heavy losses.
Thank you so much.
This is why we should stay here, and we should conduct advisory mission, and we should allocate special training facilities in Poland to exchange the experiences from the Ukrainian soldiers to transfer them to the European armies to make the processes of modernization and to direct the European defense industries in the proper way.
Thank you so much. Definitely a lot of interesting points that you made in your breakdown. Thank you for joining me. Jarosław Kraszewski, the former Armed Forces Supervision Department Director at the Polish National Security Bureau. Thank you for joining again.
Yeah, good night.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news and features.